We're back live tonight here on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. University of the Free State governance expert Dr Harlan Cloete says the National Development Plan 2030 is unlikely to realize its goals due to, among others, corruption and incoherence in strategy. The NDP was drafted in August of 2012 by the National Planning Commission, a special ministerial body constituted in 2009 by President Jacob Zuma. In its response, the Commission blames the COVID-19 pandemic, inappropriate policies and weakened governance as reasons for failure to implement the National Development Plan. But to help us get a clearer perspective on this rather important matter in South Africa's developmental trajectory, we are joined by the NPC Commissioner, Dr Siphamandla Zondi, Economic Modeling Academy Director, Dr Pali Lehohla, and governance experts, Dr Harlan Cloete. And you can be a part of the conversation tonight on 072-110-5584. Doctors, good evening. Thank you very much for your time and for coming on this evening. Dr Cloete, let me begin maybe with you before we get to the now and the implementation and the failures thereof. At diagnostic level, when the NPC did its diagnostics and reported on the challenges of too few people work, the quality of school education for black people is poor in particular, infrastructure is poorly located, inadequate and under-maintained, special divides, and so on and so forth. Were they correct at diagnosis level as to what they were about to deal with and face?
I think yes. I think the document was greeted with excitement then, that for the first time we've got political or broad societal consensus, because it was not just politicians who were involved with the diagnosis. We also had academics also involved with the diagnosis. So it was correct that that we know exactly what are the 9 challenges. At last we had a broad consensus around it. I think the disappointment of the National Development Plan is its lack, I think, of being in the discourse, in the everyday discourse. The last 10 years really has not been about finding innovative solutions and to rallying society around this National Development Plan. Remember, the National Development Plan said it so beautifully that for its implementation to work, you need leadership at all levels of society. I think that spoke to society as a whole by saying this is not just a government responsibility. It requires leadership at all levels of society. And then it asks for active citizenry, almost like the citizenry, the activism that we had before 1994. I'm a child of the 80s. There was in Afrikaans, they say a samehorigheid. There was a sense of community in rallying society around a common cause. Unfortunately, I don't think that this has happened. And so, correct, the diagnosis is correct. It is at the implementation level and the inability to rally society where the plan, I think, falls flat.
Right. Before we even get at implementation just yet, because we want to look at, I think it probably has about 15 chapters or 14 priority areas: energy, transiting to low carbon, and so on and so forth. I want us to maybe even delve deeper into those specific aspects and find out why the implementation fails there. But from what you're saying, are you saying, having diagnosed the situation, we failed to, at a national level, come up with a national system of innovation that would be able to then gather around the right people to help us implement? So even maybe at the level of research and development, did we do enough, having diagnosed what we were dealing with?
I think the focus for me is on local government. It's at the local government sphere where people experience the love or the indifference of the state. And if you look at the record of local government the last decade or so, if I just take the Free State province, for example, there's not a single municipality there has managed to capture the confidence of the community. Can't account for the financial governance there. And so it's at the local government sphere where I think that we haven't managed to to get the conversation down. Remember, at the local government, the sphere, we've got the integrated development plans. And so the conversation about the national development plan isn't even taking place at the local sphere, where there's social distance between the way politicians look at themselves and how the community experiences it. And so the last decade has been, and report after report talks about the failure of local government to make sure that the dream of 1994 is realized.
Yeah. Before we come to the Commissioner, Dr. Lehohla, let me bring you in. We've had this conversation before, and your sense that, yes, it's a blueprint. In fact, you're calling it a wish list. It was a nice wish list of things that we would like to achieve, but it lacked strategy. It lacked an actual plan. You say it can't even be called a plan. Was there a realization when, I don't understand how do we come up with this great blueprint and fail to realize, well, we actually don't have strategy to get this thing off the mark. We don't have maybe even the right minds in the room to get this thing off the mark. Dr. Lehohla?
Yes, I sound like a broken record. It's one thing to interrogate and know what makes you sick. It's another to organize the medicines that you have to take in the right sequence, in the right amounts, at the right place.
Yeah.
You seek to find that, and you don't find it. And I have to go straight into how government plans. And I've been there for 17 years as statistician general, and there are another 17 years as somebody who was working there. And I've been with my colleagues at as directors general. There is no plan in government. There is no system of planning. The closest you get to is the medium-term budget speech by the Minister of Finance, where you get some kind of coherence of a model that will tell you what the debt to GDP ratio will be, what the growth prospects will be over a period of time. And if you go to the red book, the treasury book, on pages, I can't remember what page that is, it will give you some 5 indicators of a debt to GDP ratio, of prospective growth, and it will make a short job on employment levels. For instance, that red book at the moment says by 2026, growth in South Africa will be less than 1%. Number of jobs that are created in that period will be so low that if the government goes and canvass votes for people, those are the numbers that they have to tell people. Debt to GDP. So that model is so poor that it doesn't tell you about employment, it doesn't tell you about poverty, it doesn't tell you about inequality. These are the 3 things that afflict us. Now, you need a plan that tells you about those things. So we don't have tools of foresight around which we can aggregate and say this is our path to work. Now, classically, in 2020, when COVID struck, business came to government with a document of 1,000 pages. In that document, there were 5 things that business said. One was they will generate employment and will ensure that unemployment will be about 14% by 2030. They said that debt to GDP ratio will go down to about 45%. They said inequality measured by Gini will be 0.43%. They said that growth will be about 6% per annum. Those were the targets that business said, if we do these 1,000 things that we have, these are what we'll achieve. Government didn't have instruments of aggregation or bringing that systematically together, despite the NDP. So at the heart of the state is the absence of tools of foresight that can be used to think about the future and execute towards that future.
Yeah.
Those things are still not there to this day.
Right.
Now, at Indla Mete, we actually, looking at the scenarios, we brought to bear the tools of aggregation, the tools of planning, tools that actually said what would happen if we organize the system of economics following the laws of motion. Those targets were a spitting distance from the targets that business had. The thing that business did not have was the path to get into those targets. So you can see that at the center of government is the National Development Plan, which is a nice words, diagnosis of what is the problem, but absolutely nothing about the system of planning that brings things partially together, by a sector together, and following the laws of motion of economy.
Yeah.
That is not there. Neither is there cultural, economic geography that organizes the hierarchy. And therefore, in terms of that, you could actually do something like the district development model, which at the moment is conceived outside cultural, economic geography. So there's nothing that captures systematically laws of motion of economics. No tools of foresight. In the absence of that, every document that we can place there will never be achieved.
Right. Commissioner, you've heard them there. I don't need to repeat them, but those are really clear things that would have been analyzed to saying this is what led in this document. Looks great in terms of its diagnosis, but one, according to Dr. Cloete, first is the failure to keep it in the eyes of the people, to keep it where everybody can see it and follow it. And maybe others would even say to even put somebody in charge of it, really who will be held accountable for it. And then Dr. Lehohla saying it lacks tools of foresight, be able to aggregate and plan and follow the laws of motion of economics. How do you respond to that? Dr. Siphamandla? I hope he can still hear me. Dr. Zondi, can you hear us?
Yeah, now I can hear. Yes.
All right, now you can go for it, yes.
What's the question? Yes.
The question is, from just the two analyses, from Dr. Cloete and from Dr. Pali Lehohla, and the issues that they are raising around the tools of aggregating, around tools of planning, around laws that would follow the motions of economics, and around keeping the plan in front of the people and the failures of local government. Those are some of the four issues that have been raised. What are the conversations around the table at the National Planning Commission?
If you look at, thank you very much, and appreciate the fellow panelists. If you look at the outcomes of the NDP review that the NPC undertook, it points to the same issues that my fellow colleague have mentioned. Because the overriding thing is old question South Africa has been asking itself now for over 30 years. How do you translate good plans into reality? How do you implement better what you already have? If you look at all the plans we've had over a period of time, shorter and long term, they have all been confronted with this challenge about how to do better, be more efficient at implementation, be more effective in translating the widely accepted goals, very good plan, very clear, sometimes in very great detail, into real action. Even after government had then translated this big plan into strategies. For example, if you look at the national infrastructure plan, it is a strategy for using infrastructure in order to boost economic growth, in order to attract long-term investment, in order to stimulate growth in at least 4 different sectors of the infrastructure. It's there. It's meant to translate the NDP into reality. You have the Just Transition Program. We have many others that are there, but we still have not been able to get government and the rest of society and private sector to translate all of these into real change in the lives of the people on the ground. And this is what we point out, that we need to just figure out how do you get the whole of government to do that. One of the factors we need to really think about is that we haven't been very successful in institutionalizing integrated planning, monitoring, evaluation, and oversight in the manner in which we work. It's still a process we're talking about, appealing about, pushing for over a period of time, but it seems to take a long time to have that seamless system from planning all the way to oversight. The second one is that we're still not succeeding in having a social compact that works optimally, where government, business, and civil society really work in sync in the direction of the NDP plan. As a result, you get a whole lot of this expectation that government must implement, when actually the whole of society must implement, because it's not a government development plan, but it's a national development plan accepted by all sectors. And the last one, it seems to me, is that we've not been very successful in getting citizens to be involved in the entire process, so that nobody drops the ball, because the citizens are vigilant, citizens are involved, citizens know that ultimately the implementation of the plan will be measured by the quality of life that they experience. We have not been able to do that. It's a whole process of changing the entire society.
How would you practicalize that? I mean, if you're saying citizens to be involved, what exactly would you want them to do in their involvement?
If you think about, for example, the IDPs at local government level, citizens are somewhat consulted in deciding the priorities of this particular municipality, say Ilembe municipality, some element of involvement, but citizens do not fully participate in council meetings, for example, and watch what is being said and insist on what is being said. Citizens' organizations are supposed to also be watching when the things are being implemented. If it's going to be a construction of the road in a particular area, it's going to be rolling out of infrastructure in a particular area, citizens' organizations are supposed to be saying, no, but this is now lagging behind by 2 months. It needs to push. So this idea that in order for us to achieve the end to apartheid, we had street committees with citizens standing up for themselves, and that activism was demobilized, means that then we are robbed of that capacity today, so that nothing gets discovered long after it had failed, but citizens are watching on a daily basis just to hold government to account at the various stages. When municipal councils are meeting and there is a report, Thabo, say on a local government economic plan in Zanin, and they are now working on a wine industry, citizens must be there to say, no, we're talking about this thing, we work in this area, but we don't see what you say in the report. Right. So there's a lot that gets lost because citizens are not empowered to get in, or are not encouraged to actively pursue the entire value chain of implementing any plan and any program of government at all levels, local, provincial, and national level.
We're back live tonight here on In Focus. The conversation on the National Development Plan continues. On WhatsApp, here's what Tato had to say on the conversation. The NDP will never see the light of day. Politicians are incapable of implementing anything. All they know is to steal, steal, and steal more. They are clueless, period. That is Tato there. Weighing in. Keep them coming. 072-110-5584. Or you can tweet us at Newzroom 405. Dr. Cloete, it seems... I mean, to your own analysis, to say the government might still not be able to implement this, that there are maybe, I don't know if there are new challenges or is it challenges that have always been there that would need us to address, and how would you assist them in those three areas? Planning, to monitoring, to oversight, that is an area that is currently weak. We've discussed this also with Dr. Lehohla. I'm sure he'll weigh in on why there is a lack of a social compact up until this day. At the time, it was 100 days after the president had made the the commitment and there was no social compact. Now I'm sure it's even more days after that. And then finally, the citizen activism that needs to show up. Dr. Cloete?
I think, we talked about local government. We have a participatory governance system where people can participate through the ward committee system. Now, that is also but collapsed. A lot of times the ward committee system is but used by the politician to serve his or own people in that particular ward. And so that doesn't really come to its full right. So we have an inconsistency problem in terms of implementation. Again, I come down to it's at the local government sphere where people feel it. I work within the community radio sector, for example, as well. And the community radio sector, for example, complains about how they are treated by local politicians. They are either looked at in a suspicious way. There's very little openness. There is very little transparency. And so governance at the local sphere is not really coming to its full right. Then we also have a problem with competency. Now, the National Treasury released a report last year, I think, National Capacity Building for Local Government. And in that report, they refer to the capability. The National Development Plan speaks of a capable state. Now, capability speaks to the systems and the process, but a lot, for example, there's a local government CETA, there's SALGA. A lot of resources have gone into building individual capacity within municipalities. But many times individuals come back and they cannot implement these systems. And so it renders the entire system incapable. And so for me, it all starts locally with local conversations. And what we have developed, you're asking how do we get out of this? We developed a system called Governance 5 IQ that is based on 5 direct questions. Firstly, we ask, why do we do what we do? If an official, you need to know, why am I here? Am I here to lead or am I here to loot? And unfortunately, there's been a lot of stealing and looting and inconsistency in local government. And so it's important that every public institution, why are we there? Are we there to serve ourselves or are we there to serve the people? Then secondly, we ask in the Governance 5 IQ, how is it that we do? How do we do what we do? And so that speaks to the level of how do we get out of here? It's no use we have the plans, but what is the pathways out of poverty? What are the pathways in a coordinated sphere with other spheres? Because we work with a developmental state where local government cannot do it alone, working with other spheres of government. So how do we do what we do? If we understand why we do what we do, we need to understand then how do we do it. Then at any moment of time, we must be able to check, are we on track? And that speaks to our monitoring and evaluation systems that should, in a dashboard way, keep us on track. Almost like a pilot flying a plane. When we go off course, we must come back. We must self-correct. And so any governance system is reliant on an effective monitoring and evaluation system. And then if we're then not on track, how do we then correct? Is it behavior? Is it system? Is it processes? What is the things that we need to fix? And then finally, our Governance 5 IQ talks about leadership and learning, which really talks to knowledge management, innovation. How do we lead in government? What are the lessons learned? How do we keep institutional memory? How do we make sure that the lessons learned, and also benchmarking, looking at other government departments, looking outside in the region, etc., internationally. But our Governance 5 IQ is a model that we say that can be used to implement our policies better.
Yeah.
I think if we should have a World Cup now on policies, we would win without having to practice. We've got great policies in this country. It's at the level of implementation that we are lacking, and that is because we've got institutions that have almost become incapable.
Yeah.
Because of the culture in the institutions that renders delivery almost impossible.
Yeah.
And so we maintain the organization, but we are not leading.
Right. Dr. Lehohla, to the Governance 5 IQ, I mean, on that score alone, one would say, but we do have institutions to deal with these issues. If we are to answer Dr. Zondi, to say, for example, if we're talking monitoring and evaluation, if you have an institution like Statistics South Africa that is able to always keep an eye and have its eye on inflation, on the cost of living, and have its eye and be able to aggregate this data and be able to report to us at a regular level, we have institutions that are able to monitor and evaluate our progress. Why are we not using them effectively to do the things that we want done in the National Development Plan? If we say we've got oversight, we've got Parliament, right? Parliament is supposed to run this process of oversight. There is an institution that is, when it wants to, at some point, did a whole inquiry into ESCOM, and they hold people before that system. We just saw some other processes now happening where the SIU was then, and so on and so forth, around the escape in the prison there in Mangaung. We've got these institutions of oversight, but it seems when we need them the most, we don't use them effectively the way that we want them to be used.
I think we are running around the totem, the drum. The point is, there are no systems of planning in government. There are no systems of quantification in government to quantify the plan. There is no plan that tells you we'll generate so many jobs. We'll deal with poverty and reduce it to this. These systems are complex. And computing these things following the laws of motion, we don't have a system that captures that. And we put files side by side on spreadsheets and we think we are planning. The social accounting matrix is the most common thing that people try to use these days. And the social accounting matrix has fixed relationships. It's an accounting framework. You don't have a system of saying, what if we do the following? And then what will be the impacts on a different set of terrains? What are the implications for taxation? What are the implications for exports and imports? You need a massive modeling system to give you that, and you need competent people who can do that. At the moment, the nearest we come to that is using the Treasury CGE model. But that CGE model is based on market economics. And therefore, when government intervenes, it says there is a market failure. Whereas the interventionist system of government requires heterodox systems that actually tames the market to get certain outcomes. So if we think that free market fundamentalism will solve the problems of unemployment and inequality and poverty, we are mistaken. In that model, those three variables are not there. There are no variables that work with municipalities in that system. Yet we think that municipalities can do something. So it's high time we thought of a different system that sits at the center of government, that communicates the complexity of a plan with clear outcomes. And these systems are there.
So are these systems
and we think that we can
that are designed by economists, actuaries, accountants, mathematicians, scientists? Do they all sit around the room and design a system specifically for South Africa? Or are these systems that can be adapted and taken from elsewhere?
The systems must follow the laws of motion of economics. They must follow the laws of culture. I mean, China does its planning with special characteristics of China. That's where you embed culture in the plan. At the moment, we have stripped planning of culture, we have stripped planning of economics, we've stripped planning of geography, and we have left it as a financial plan, and we have stripped everything that makes meaning to life meaningful.
Yeah.
And we are planning on finance.
I like what you're saying. So
and accountants.
Tell us a little bit more about stripping plans around geography. What do you mean? Give us an example of that.
You see, when you don't have geographic dimensions in your plan, that says what will happen in that space as a consequence of national policies, then that plan is deficient. Because local governments are beneficiaries of a national plan. A national plan doesn't say anything about local sphere of government. It tells you what inflation will be, it tells you what debt to GDP ratio will be. It doesn't tell you what will happen to the people where they are.
Yeah.
Instead, we say they must use IDP.
Yeah.
IDP, yes, is something that responds to a national plan, but it's not a plan that is adequate to interface with this thing that we have at the national level. So unless and until we understand that we need instruments that are capable of capturing the laws of motion of the economy at the geographic space and at the cultural level, we are far from achieving what we think we are achieving. I mean, just think about Smarts and then Bayo when they started ESCO, when they started ISCO, and when they started all this infrastructure of sets of institutions of the state such as CSIR and so on. They didn't work on this on a spreadsheet, which is what is happening here in the country. It's a complex system, and we must appreciate complexity. Now we think that we can resolve this complexity through common sense, and in my village or in my constituency, this happens. No, it can't. So it's high time we wake up to that. And in waking up to that, we have to have capable people that can manage these models.
Yeah. Yeah.
And use them and have line of sight of the consequences of actions long before the actions are taken. We disempower the president. When he talks to the State of the Nation address, he talks about inputs. He doesn't talk about impacts because he cannot have capacity to have impacts for as long as we don't have serious, significant, complex modeling systems. So we can't hold him to account because he can't generate 4 million jobs. He doesn't have a system that will alert him to that in the next 10 years. So go and look at the Treasury document. Look at the end of that document, at the impacts. You will never find what will happen to poverty, what will happen to inequality. You may find something on employment which says there will be 200,000 jobs created in this year. And you don't need 200,000 jobs. You need 2 million jobs created in this country to solve the problem. And therefore, it means that for us to get from a 2 million creation of jobs, we actually have to ask ourselves, what do we have to do in each of and every other sector?
Yeah.
So you don't use only the input-output system, the supply and use tables, social accounting matrix, growth accounting framework. You actually have to bring those things together into a forward-looking tool.
Yeah.
No, not these CGE models that we are using.
Yeah.
So time we woke up to the defects of tools in our system.
Right. National systems of innovation, Dr. Zondi, are critical for the growth of the economy, and we seem to not have those. What's the synopsis here? How does it play out in terms of that particular area?
Yes, let me just echo what my colleague was just saying just now. You know, you won't believe it, Thabo, that we have sectorial growth master plans. So there's a master plan for each area where we need to grow. Renewable energy, ICT, global business services, tourism, mining, agriculture, and all of those. These are specific master plans that spells out what is the contribution of that sector to employment, to economic growth, to reducing inequality, to dealing with all these problems. A beautiful idea that you now have specific customized things. But I think and then also again with innovation and how we could use innovation and digital technologies and the new industrial revolution mechanisms to leapfrog many levels of development. But it's very clear to us that unless you strengthen leadership in society, you will not be able to organize all these mechanisms, all these tools that Dr. Lehohla is talking about. You will not be able to organize them in a manner that helps us in a serious way. We won't be able to bring business together with government to work in sync. We won't be able to get parliament to watch government not on activities but on outcomes on making a difference and stuff like that. What we have to get a whole society without very strong leadership and leadership across society as well, building it up at all levels, in state and outside state. Secondly, you won't actually be able to succeed in this unless you get everybody to commit to the plan fully. Because one of the things we realize is that part of the reason why the plan is not being realized is that it gets dislocated by business as usual. Government is already used, for example, it's already used to its what's called annual performance plan and the 3-year strategic plans. And these plans can dislocate the overall plan. Similarly, business is already used to business plan that it does and all that. These can almost completely dislocate the national plan. We have been used to working in silos for a long period of time, and we are not unlearning it. It's very difficult to unlearn it. Everybody, by the way, even you guys in the media, are part of the game, used to working in a silo rather than participating in a national program that will improve the whole of society. We in academia are also used to the same logic, and that logic is compatible for us. It's the way we have worked all the time. We need a culture change, a deep change of institutional culture across society if we are ever going to achieve Vision 2030, or at least move in the direction of it. But that culture change is going to require very hard decisions. It's going to require catalysts that are going to get things moving. It's going to require leaders to lead in government, outside government. It's going to require a social component of these structures for them to work in sync, because when they are separate, they don't achieve their goals, individual goals and collective goals. So we are stuck.
Let's leave it there, unfortunately, for tonight because of time. I appreciate you for coming on, gentlemen. That is Dr. Siphamandla Zondi, Economic Modeling Academy Director, Dr. Pali Lehohla, as well as the governance expert, Dr. Cloete there. Right, when we continue next, we'll update you on what's in the news tonight.